G'day. In this video, we're going to be looking at using labels, and we're going to put them in a frame and then move them around using the Pack Layout Manager. Let's get into it. So we've got a pretty simple start to our application here. We've got a normal class with our idiom at the bottom to call the class and make it show the window. And we've set some options for the window to give it a title and a size. There's a couple of new things here. One is we're using TTK widgets today. TTK, themed TK widgets is what that stands for. That allows us to create styles and to style the widgets in a really consistent way. We'll talk about that more later. And we're going to use that though to show this frame. This frame, we're going to give it a style and we're going to make it gray so we can see it. And a frame is just a container. So in this case, I've called it the container frame. But it's a TTK frame. That's the kind of widget that it is. And it just lets you put other widgets inside it. So a frame is one of the building blocks of Tkinter. You use frames to lay out your interfaces and put widgets inside them. And then you lay out those frames in kind of like blocks, a bit like building up Lego models. So let's have a look at this window. And it's just a grey window. And you can see that the dark grey is the frame. So it's expanded out to fill the whole window. Normally a frame doesn't have any size, and you can see that I haven't told it a width or a height or anything like that, but I have told it to do these two things. I've told it to fill both directions, vertically and horizontally, and I've told it to expand. The one means it set it to true. And what that does is that means that the frame will fill the whole space that it can. And that's why we get that fully filled up window with the dark grey. So now that we've got our frame, let's add some labels. And we'll just uncomment these. And we've got 4 labels. And you'll see what they look like when we run it. First, second, third, fourth. And we've given each one a color so we can see what space they're taking up. That's a background color for each label. And at the moment, you'll remember that when you create your label or any widget, one line of code is going to create it. So in this case, we've called our label first. It's a TTK label, and we've added it to the frame. So this time we're not adding it to the window object, we're adding it to a frame, a container inside the window. There's our text, and there's how we set the background color. But as soon as we've created the widget, it's not going to show until we use a layout manager. And in this case, we're using the Pack Layout Manager. And we haven't given it any options, so that's why they're all showing one under each other in the middle. But we can give them options. And the options can make a big difference to how your interface gets laid out. So for starters, let's have a look at what happens if we just give it one option, the fill option to the first label. We're going to tell it to fill both vertically and horizontally. Wonder what that's going to do. Funnily enough, it didn't fill, you'd think it didn't fill vertically because there's all this space. But the label doesn't know that it's supposed to fill this space. It doesn't really know that it's empty because there's another label right underneath it. So it's filled all its space that it thinks it has. But there's nothing on the sides of it, so it's filled up all that space. Okay, so what happens when we give it the expand attribute as well, or the expand option? Let's put it in there. Just for the first label, and now you see it's doing something like you might have expected it did the first time. But now it's actually expanding and it's trying to use up as much space as it can. So all that space that wasn't being used at the bottom has now been used up by this label and it's pushed all the other ones down. And you'll notice the text now is sort of on the left but in the middle. That's because when it expands it thinks that that's the whole label. So that's just where the text can fit in. If we had a bigger font, it would just take up more space. So we can actually move that text around though. But we're not going to use, or we're not going to give the pack command an option to do it. We're going to tell the label what to do with the text. And the way to do that is to use the anchor command. We need an N in there. Anchor, and then you give it a compass coordinate. North for up the top, south for down the bottom, and east and west. And you've got the combinations, north, east, south, west, those kind of things. And you can either type, just in quotes, north in lowercase for north, or if you want, and you want to be sort of, I don't know, more specific, You can type tk dot, in this case, because we're using the tk naming convention, tk dot north or dot n. And so let's see what this does. It's now pushed our text up to the north. How about if we wanted to put it up in this corner here? That would be northeast. So we could put an E there, run it again, and now we've pushed it over here. Southeast, southwest. Let's try and put it down there, just double check one last time. So let's go southwest. Awesome. So the anchor command moves the text around if the label has a way for, or a space for it to move into. So these ones, if wouldn't matter what anchor we put on there, they'd still look the same. We can show that. Let's try this. We'll put the anchor on one of the other labels and see if it makes any difference. Nope. The label doesn't have anywhere to move to. So in other words, it's taking up the minimum amount of space it can, and therefore, doesn't matter what anchor you put, it's still going to look like it's in the same spot. If, however, we gave that label some options like these, the same as we did the first label, all of a sudden, it's going to space them out. And you'll notice that now the available space, the empty space we had in the beginning, has now been shared between these two. And that's because we've told them to both expand and both fill up the space. So they're basically just halving it between them. And we could do the same thing for the others, and we may as well. And you'll see that probably what you think is going to happen happens. They just expand like that. That third one's a bit interesting. Why is that one in the center? That's because we've used an anchor center. So not only can you use coordinates, there's one other anchor value that you can use, and that's the center. And you can see it, I think, can you see it there? No, it's not showing on that one. But center is a valid option. So if you want your text to appear in the center of a sort of a label that you've spaced out like this, use the center option. And there is one other thing that's probably worth trying before we finish, and that's to set the sides. When you pack an object, you can tell it to go on a top, bottom, left, or right side. So we can add an extra argument in here called side, and let's put this one on tk.top. And you'll see what this does. It's going to look a bit funny, but you might be able to work it out. Oh, that one didn't work. So let's change this one to put it somewhere else, because that one was already on the top, wasn't it? So let's change this one to be side equals tk dot left. Now it's starting to look a bit strange. So that one was on the top. That's why nothing happened. So the order that you pack the objects in can also change your layout. Let's put this one on the bottom. Once again, you can just use text like quotes and quote bottom, and it would do that. So it has put this one on the bottom, the third one, and now you can see it's below the fourth one. The fourth one's now up here. Because we haven't told what side the fourth one to show on, the third one has pushed it above it. And you'll see that the second one's spacing is now changed as well. So let's give this final one a side. So we'll put this one on the right, I suppose. We haven't used that yet. So we can put that like that. And I think I've got to close that window. And there you go. And you'll see that we've got some unusual spacing there because the fourth one hasn't actually sort of taken up any extra space. The other ones have taken it up by themselves. So by fiddling with these attributes for the pack command and also setting anchors and colors, you should be able to get an understanding of how you can lay out your widgets just using a simple pack. You don't have to worry about widths. The great thing about this is that if you change the size of your window, the relative sizes of the widgets will stay the same. And that can be like really nice for your interfaces. And it doesn't take too much code or too much effort once you get it how you want it. But you're going to need to probably practice. So here's a trick for you. Well, here's a test for you. See if you can make a flag kind of picture out of labels and colors and packing the labels into a frame, like I did on the at the start of the video where I had the Irish flag with 3 rectangles of color. Pick a flag that's got, probably rectangles is the easiest, or squares if you can find one, but rectangles of color horizontally or vertically, and see if you can make it with, 2 or 3 labels. That'll be a good test for you. That's all we're going to do today though. Thanks for watching, but see if you can have a go. You'll learn a lot by actually changing the attributes and writing your code yourself. See you in the next video.